Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Moral Discrepancy channel. Not a lot of morals, but a ton of discrepancy. Here I'm going to go through some of my hydraulic system and how I like to do things. And some of which you'll see is not. Eh, it's still better than a lot of stuff that I see. And it's just not my favorite. But anyways, disregard the suction line. It's not actually fastened to anything. I don't have the clamps that I need. But I'm mostly pinpointing here on how I do these stainless steel lines and how I like to do them. And this is a new thing for me, and I seem to get a lot of requests for it. So, well, here I go. I figured I'd try and help you guys, I don't know, at least give it a try. I mean, it seems to be a huge hit for me. So I'm running not only the 4 plow hoses for up, down, left, right, load sense. I'm running case drain and pressure out of the stainless. So using the Byers tubing clamp blocks. And it gains me more than enough axle clearance, and it's pretty stout when it's all said and done. I mean, I'm a pretty small dude, and it doesn't say much, but I can easily just suspend my body weight from any section of those hard lines, and it's not an issue. Um, so, anyways, this is just kind of a rough idea on how I like to do things. It's not a be-all, end-all, but it's just how I do things. And so usually I'll like to look down my path that everything needs to run, and I'll just kind of get an idea of where I can bracket and where my lines need to bend. And so I'll start with one bracket, and I try to pick up on existing bolt patterns. These are going into a threaded bolt pattern on the transmission, so using the weld-on standoffs for these clamp blocks. Now keep in mind, if you're going to stack like a total of 6 lines on the lower part of them, you're going to need to modify a bolt. If you don't, when you tighten it up, it'll actually press the threaded insert out. So keep that in mind. I like to tighten up my whole stack and then shave the bolt accordingly, and then deburr it, obviously. And so starting with one end, I'll work my way to the other, trying to keep everything relatively in line and pick up off of existing threaded holes or existing bolts that I can. And usually 1 inch by, quarter-inch 3/16 flat bar is usually sufficient. And this just happens to be the best layout for the lines that I've found yet. Easiest to install. So anyways, then when I figure out my offset on the bends, I start to lay that out on the floor. And I like to keep the layout straight and then mark out all of my clamping locations. Just in case some of the more complicated ones, the bends will be in between clamps. So you got to keep that in mind. And then definitely offset your tubing. If they're right next to each other, offset them. Otherwise, you're going to have a bitch of a time tightening everything up. So, especially when you're doing the full 6 of the half-inch lines. And then that's why I use the floor layout, is so you can overlay your bender over the top of it to make sure everything's kosher. With a Harbor Freight bender, it doesn't match this size tubing with these dies, so jog it 1 inch to the left, 1 inch to the right, to avoid kinking, and you'll come up with consistent results. Like, I mean, it's not perfect, but don't worry about perfection. Like, you see I'm a 1/4 inch at least up off of that clamp there, and don't worry about perfection. That stuff will alleviate itself. It's fine. Um, like you'll attain that perfection through consistency. That is really the biggest thing right there. And then there you see offsetting your fittings. That is really crucial right there. And when I mark out my tubing, I make sure to take my mark all the way around it just in case. Um, Here I am starting on the half-inch tubing. Um, Same thing, just keep it consistent. Start with all of your half-inch tubing bends, make sure that they're consistent with each other, and then start on the next bend. Um, and just it really just takes a little bit of practice. I mean, it's not that daunting of a thought to do stainless from front to rear. Like, I literally have not messed up one hard line yet. One of my coworkers has, but I think I've done 9 trucks like this so far, and I haven't screwed up one line yet. So, just take your time, a little bit of thought process, and you can easily, add a little bit of cost, expense, time, and headache to your build, and back yourself into a corner with your fittings. And it's no it. And sometimes you got to get creative with brackets. Like I needed a 3/4 inch distance standoff. Well, I didn't want to cut a piece of 3/4 inch plate, so a couple of 5/8 nuts seemed perfect. Just weld them on, and it was that or 3/4 inch plate. But with a little bit of planning, stagger your fittings. Otherwise, you'll remember that the first time you do it. Also, don't mount to transmission, engine, and frame. It's one or the other. Don't mount anything to the frame that has been mounted to the engine and transmission. I mean, you're going to definitely cause yourself some issues there. So this last bracket, I had to jog over from the final engine mount bolt because that was the last one. So I hope I answered more questions than